A committee of Parliament will this month present its views to Parliament about refining the laws of our land. A high-level panel was chaired by former President Kgaleme Motlhanthe. It went across South Africa to garner the views of citizens. Its mandate was to review the laws, identify gaps or identify laws that needed to be changed. The panel raised several issues regarding land reform. It presented a report, and Parliament has now formed a 13-member committee to come up with recommendations. Well, the Speaker of the House is in the House. You'll know National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete from our parliamentary sessions where she calls for order. She joins us in studio now. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Mbete.
Thank you for inviting me.
With the political changes, firstly, it seems like opposition parties have quietened down in the House. Is it easier for you to keep order in Parliament at the moment?
Well, when you talk about keeping order in Parliament, you are talking about a lot more than just what you see in a plenary sitting where members are sitting on the benches and we're having a debate, and then there's interaction sometimes which does get sometimes out of order. But the work of Parliament and what we are looking at is a lot more than that. I mean, you know, the time we spend in the House is not the sum total of the work that we do. Remember, you have committees are meeting and looking at details of various matters that are before them. And in your introduction, you referred to a high-level panel which was formed by the Speakers Forum in order for it to pursue a matter that had been left to us, the Fifth Parliament, to look into and to take forward. And this matter was left in the legacy report we found from the Fourth Parliament. I think it's important for South Africans to understand that even we, given that this is the last year before the next election, we are now busy preparing a legacy report for the next Parliament. And so this high-level panel was our way of taking forward an issue that had been raised for us to look into. And that was about looking at the impact of laws that had already been passed on society, on people, on communities. So that's what the high-level panel was looking into. However, because in their report, there are a whole range of recommendations, and a central matter that had come up as they went around the country was the issue of land reform. But there were more issues that they looked into.
Was the idea that maybe the laws that were finalized at the dawn of democracy are no longer appropriate? We've developed as a country, and Kgaleme Motlhanthe and this high-level team, what were they doing? Did they go into people's homes? Did they speak to experts? Just explain briefly how the process actually worked.
The process was a very thoroughgoing process because they visited every province, and in every province they had a number of public hearings. They also called on certain experts, people in various areas, depending on the terms of reference that they were looking into. For instance, land reform was one of the issues that had been crisply put as one of the terms of reference to look into how far are we as a country. So they would go talk to traditional leaders, talk to traditional communities, talk to people in communities in rural and urban centers in every province. They also called on experts in particular areas in order for them to put specific questions to them so they would hear people's voices about those matters that would be before a particular hearing.
Can you comment on something some of the parties have picked up? They say that this high-level panel emphasizes the failure of land reform, a lack of political will to use the tools we have there already, rather than presenting any sort of argument for expropriation without compensation.
Actually, what the high-level panel report brings out are just issues that people are talking about in terms of them having applied to government under the various programs that the government would have to get back land that had been taken through forced removals over the ages, through, you know, a whole range of communities just being suddenly removed, talking about the past decades under apartheid. So those are the issues that people are complaining that in spite of them having raised their needs, their applications for land to be given back to those families, that nothing had happened. And in fact, only 4% of what people had come forward to request had been responded to successfully. In other areas, what they would find is that over time, people having been removed from their communities had been replaced by other people as forced removals, wave upon wave of forced removals had happened. And therefore, when now we see that in fact there have been different groups occupying the same space or the same piece of land over time, they will just, this is now government officials, according to the report, according to what people were saying, they would bundle all of them together back onto that piece of land and say, talk among yourselves, try and make it work so that we can, you know, and that becomes very difficult. So these are not very good reports. And so the report itself has recommendations which are now going to be taken through further sifting, further looking into as to, in the view of the various committees in Parliament, how must we improve on the process? How can we put more haste into the pace of things? Which are the immediate areas that we can implement? Which are those that must, in fact, in our legacy report, be put to the 6th Parliament to pick up and take forward in whatever way that is being recommended?
There's a little quote I took out of that report looking at the constraints to land reform, including evidence of corruption by officials, the diversion of the land reform budget to elites, lack of political will. We were talking about lack of training and capacity. Does this not, as in other areas, point maybe not to the fact that laws need to change, but that we need to clamp down on corruption? You've spoken about the role of Parliament in that. To what extent does Parliament take responsibility for what has gone before and can beef up that corruption oversight in future?
I think the role of Parliament, according to the appropriate sections of the Constitution, is about making laws, but it is also about exercising oversight to make sure that the true content of what is in the law or what is in the Constitution is being actually implemented on the ground in the lives of people. So on an ongoing basis, from time immemorial, for as long as we have had a Parliament, Parliament is supposed to be playing that role. So it's not a recent thing because now there's this buzz about state capture and therefore there's more volume and talking about inquiries in Parliament. Parliament has always done that because it is the role of Parliament to exercise oversight, while the executive must ensure that policy that has been agreed to through the manifesto that people have voted for, we are supposed to ensure that through our government, those things are being implemented. Parliament must exercise oversight to really ensure that the monies that are spent on the things that we have promised our people we are going to spend them on. So yes, it is the role of Parliament. And Parliament is, in fact, can only improve on those measures that we have always been about anyway.
I wish I could ask you so many more questions, but perhaps we can chat after those recommendations are given to the Rules Committee that you head in Parliament. Thank you for being with us tonight, the National Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Baleka Mbete.